Hello, this is Mark Wakefield, back again with some exciting information on financial analysis concepts. Data planning and financial management are keys to running a financially successful organization. Ratio analysis is critical for helping you understand financial statements, for identifying trends over time, and for measuring the overall financial state of your organization. In some situations, lenders and potential investors often rely on ratio analysis when making lending and investing decisions. In healthcare organizations, the Finance Committee is responsible for overseeing the financial affairs of the organization and making recommendations to the leadership team. This committee is responsible for directing and reviewing preparation of financial statements, operating budgets, major capital requests, and so on. However, in order for this financial information to be useful, there are several areas that should be explored to understand different formats required for pulling this information together. The areas we're going to explore in this presentation include how you might use trend analysis and comparative analysis as a financial manager in healthcare. What are the benefits and challenges associated with the three different sources of information for forecasts? How do assumptions impact revenue forecasts? And how would common sizing trend analysis be used to better understand capacity? And throughout this presentation, I will utilize the budget and finance information from a hospital's clinical engineering department to provide examples of the topics being discussed. To start off with, we begin our discussion on trend and comparative analysis. Trending analysis compares figures over several time periods. In the example on your screen, I've taken a snapshot of a hospital clinical engineering department for a certain fiscal year. As one reviews the left column, they can see that the budget line items that are being tracked for the fiscal year. On the far right, one can see the general ledger codes that are utilized for pulling corrected data into each line item. The target column, the second one from the left, indicates the monthly budget. The columns July through November indicate how much money was spent in each month. Any number in red indicates a variance of 5% or more and must be justified to the CFO of the organization. Also included in this report is the year-to-date spend, along with the expected year-to-date budget. The difference and the percentage of variance is also annotated for each of the line items for ease in identifying areas of success and struggles. Looking at this monthly trending data, it is easy to see where the clinical engineering department has performed well and where the department needs to make some adjustments. However, overall, the department is running 4% under budget for this fiscal year and this reporting period, which is a very solid performance. In contrast to the trending data, the analysis involves an item-by-item comparison of two or more sets of data. In accounting, for example, changes in a financial statement's items over several accounting periods get together to detect the emerging trends in a company's operations and results. In our example 2 here, you can see a snapshot of the same clinical engineering budget for the previous fiscal year compared to our first example. This information has been trended over the first 5 months of the fiscal year. When comparing our two fiscal years side by side, one can see that over the first 5 months, the most recent fiscal year has a smaller percentage of variance, which seems to indicate the department is spending more money. However, upon closer examination, it can be seen that the current fiscal year budget, the third column from the left, on the left table, has expected yearly budget to date of over $270,000 less than the previous year, as seen on the table on the right. It should also be noted that the overall yearly spending rate has remained relatively flat, with a difference of only $44,000 between the 2 years. This comparison provides the clinical engineering director a good snapshot of the stability of his program over the 2 reporting periods. Next, we will review the sources of forecast information. The dictionary defines to forecast as to calculate or predict some future event or condition, usually as a result of study and analysis of available pertinent data. As can be seen on our screen, there are three different sources of information for forecasts. First, the people who are directly involved with the department or the unit. The benefit here is that these individuals work with the day-to-day activities and processes that drive the financial numbers. They are valuable resources for understanding current trends and/or variances that may occur in the financial data. The disadvantage is that they may not have direct input for the financial calculations, so their information and experience may get lost in translation when their leaders are working on future budgets. The second source is the data that has been collected over time. The benefit of this data is that it can be collected and archived and then utilized as required. Computer systems makes this data easier to collect and analyze, and many years can be assessed or accessed relatively quickly. The challenges with this type of data is that the analysis is only as good as the data that is entered and stored. If it is not managed correctly, mistakes can be made in future predictions. For example, with our clinical engineering group, this fiscal year we have a variance of $44,000 a month on a contract that was missed. The contract was missed in its prediction because the data in the database indicated this piece of equipment would have been on warranty much longer than anticipated, but it turns out the warranty actually expired a year ago. This warranty expiration was not caught by the vendor who provides the contract, and it was not caught by the director of clinical engineering. So there's a $44,000 variance that will have to be projected for next year, and in the interim, that will keep the current year's budget behind. The third source of forecast information is actually the executive level team. At this level, the entire budget can be reviewed and adjustments made to allow for growth of an organization. However, this often involves making forecasts in a volatile healthcare market. And if new legislation and/or rules are put into place, future predictions of revenue growth may not come to fruition. For example, the Affordable Care Act has had a huge impact on payer mix and reimbursement rates in the healthcare industry. This has resulted in many healthcare organizations, especially in rural areas, to shut their doors as they are unable to generate the required revenue to operate. Our third area of discussion looks at how assumptions can impact a forecasted budget. Any forecast requires an individual to make assumptions about things that are outside their control. Unless these forecasts are very accurate, they aren't helpful at all. Inaccurate forecasts can lead to upset stakeholders, mismanaged expenses, and potentially running out of cash. In the example on our screen, it can be seen that the Director of Clinical Engineering Department analyzed two key data sets of information. First, the director took a snapshot of what he had projected for the previous fiscal year's monthly expenses. See the submitted section table. And then looked at what the variance was compared to the budget from the previous year before that. In this case, it can be seen that there was a proposed increase of less than 1% in his budget. However, as he was looking forward to the future, the director kept track of the monthly spend rate. He analyzed it, as seen in the current fiscal year column, and built a projection for the new fiscal year, as seen in the projection column. In this manner, it can be seen that the initial budget for next fiscal year, before any other additions or modifications are made, could actually be decreased by 21%. Several assumptions are at play here. They include utilization assumptions, for example, how much outside services will be required, contractual assumptions, see the contract line, and trend analysis assumptions. The most glaring assumption as a whole, though, is the assumption that next year's spending rate will not change. This is dangerous because it was found that the expenses for the second half of the current fiscal year increased after the proposed budget had been submitted. This has the potential to set the clinical engineering department up to run in the red because there is not enough funding projected for the actual run rate of the expenditures. Two additional assumptions, the patient mix assumption and the payer change assumption, were not reviewed as part of this specific analysis, as the clinical engineering department is not a clinical department. Last but not least, a quick review of costs is warranted. Balance sheet common size ratios are important for making comparisons of assets and liabilities. For example, these financial ratios focus on calculating each asset on the balance sheet as a percentage of the total assets, and each liability as a percentage of the total liabilities plus the owner's equity. Calculating and comparing common size ratios for corresponding reporting periods into consecutive years helps one to identify trends such as decreasing cash and increasing accounts receivable balances. As stated earlier, trending analysis compares figures over several time periods. This process is similar to common size ratio in that dollar amounts are converted to percentages to obtain relative basis for comparison, but now the comparison is across time. It is important to understand that financial planning can be created around this data, which in turn can strengthen your accounts receivables, collection policies, and tightening credit grant guidelines. On our example on the screen, though, pulled from our clinical engineering department being discussed, we can see that these types of ratios, which are shown in percentage blue, may also be utilized within a department on a monthly basis to identify how, where, and when spending occurs. Trending this data over the time will allow the manager or director to more adequately project future budgets and spending requirements associated with their area of responsibility. In order to succeed with an organizational finances, one must understand and be willing to submit to those appointed over them. One cannot wrestle financial matters alone and must work together as a team in order to thrive. Hebrews 13:7 reminds us, "Obey those who rule over you, and be submissive, for they watch out for your souls, as those who must give account. Let them do so with joy, and not with grief, for that would be unprofitable for you." Why should a believer obey their leaders? Because their leaders watch over their souls and must give accounting to God. Leaders are stewards of everyone who follows them. God has placed leaders in kind of that middle management under his leadership. Keeping our focus and working and our work centered on God is the best assurance in all that we do. Thank you.